Vittorio DeSica, a wonderful Italian director, classic, modern, everything, a generous, warm man. In 1960, I took the daring step, happily, to take a shot at acting in Italy. I went to Rome and worked in a Roberto Rossellini film, and that was my first attempt. I went armed with two phrases. Mi dispiace sono in ritardo means I'm sorry I'm late, because I usually was. And il cielo era grigio oggi, all right? So il cielo era grigio means the sky was gray today. Now, what do you say? What if it was blue? Well, to me it was always gray. That's all I knew. I didn't say blue. Il cielo era grigio oggi. So I went with those two phrases and very little knowledge, certainly, about the history of films in Europe. And I appreciated all the French films and the English films and Italian films, but I didn't really realize that the birth of Neo-realism started with Roberto Rossellini, Vittorio DeSica, and Luchino Visconti gets in that group too. It's followed by many other great directors, but those three kind of get the credit for Neo-realism. And I've always wondered, what is Neo-realism? What that means is realistically shot stories of real things. Not exactly what the Italian audience wanted. They wanted happy endings and musicals and a Technicolor and such. But the Italian film, the thing that made Neo-realism stand out and become a phenomena that was appreciated throughout the world was three things. One is the freedom of expression. No one in the government told them what they could or couldn't say. Two, social comment. They all were making social comments. Many of them had suffered under the fascist regimes, and they were now be able to make social comments. And poverty. They had no money. They had to scratch and scramble to get the camera, get the film. And so it started like that with the regular people in the streets as actors. If they didn't have an actor that was right for the role, they just grabbed someone and put him in. During the war, there was they kind of scratched around. The film business was only propaganda films. Italian fascists, or when the Germans were there, only films made to glorify the Axis powers. And so the film guys, all the directors and cameramen, everyone, all kind of banded together, and they engaged in a large, wonderful campaign to shoot films, propaganda films. Let's glorify the army. So they made a desert movie about the Desert War, and they got tanks, they got all kinds of stuff. And then they, at a certain point when they're just about done and everyone's ready, they went to the authorities. They said, wait a minute, you gave us alpine film. This film doesn't work in the desert. We've got to do it all over again. So what they did is they kept stalling things. And as it turns out, all of them were pretty much stayed in Rome or wherever they were. I know his family was taken out to the country. He had them out in the country at the time during the war. But in Rome, in Italy, after the war, when money was totally scarce, the film business had been scattered as far as making of films and releasing them. So a neo-realism was born, and it was wonderful. And they took non-actors, made them actors. They took actors and took their makeup off. It was just working in the streets and in the homes and in the palazzos of Rome with little, there's little minimal lighting maybe, but still very, very realistic. Whatever the world gave them that day, that's what they shot. So those three that headed it, Luchino Visconti was a stage director primarily, opera and grand theater, but he did shoot in the streets, and in Christ Stopped at Eboli, I think, was one of them, or I forget the title of some of his movies. But he soon went into the theaters and into the sound stages. I might mix it up, but in Italy, the word sound stage is translated, they say theater. Theater, you're in theater. Teatro Uno, you're in today. The remaining two that I knew and was very lucky to know, Roberto Rossellini, first from the film, and Vittorio DeSica later. Rossellini in his period was more kind of really in the streets and gritty stuff. Vittorio had some story sense more maybe and kind of poignant stories and such, but there was a thing that Roberto said that I went in 1960, which is, was 15 years after the end of the war in Europe. And so they had in France, they had school children who were born in 1945 who they threw names at them and say, who were these people? See how much they learned or forgot in the history of those 15 years. And they said, Adolf Hitler, bad German man, bad German dictator, general, bad person. Benito Mussolini, Italian neo-realistic film director. Roberto said he just loved that because, of course, the Ini is what did it. Mussolini, Rossellini, but he was very proud of this. This I'm famous, he said. He also said something else that was so apt to me in my life as an actor turning into a director. He said, a director, there's just two rules in direction, just two very cardinal rules. One is have something to say, and the second is say it. Don't talk about how good it's going to be. Don't talk about they're going to say it next year. Don't talk about, all that counts is you making the film, a film of some import, and getting it to the public, getting it to people to watch it. It's incomplete until it's being viewed by someone in a dark theater. So that was always a rule of mine. I didn't always live by it. I went into television directing. I had ideas for movies, and I talked about the ideas and stuff. And very rarely did I actually get to say them, And I'm still thinking that maybe there's time to still say something. Anyway, he acted in a film that I starred in, as a matter of fact. It was called Un amore a Roma, Love in Rome. And it was about a guy who was in love with a girl who was indiscriminate. And she had been the girlfriend of a guy who was an actor, Jacques Cernas. Remember Jacques Cernas? He was in Hercules. And in that film, they did an interior in Cinecittà, which is the big movie studio, in which the director was having difficulty with a difficult scene. And the director of that movie that I was observing was Vittorio DeSica, who came in one day, did it all. And then we all heard jokes about how he was always in debt, and then he would come and do anything, and he was playing a director, and the big joke in that one was he would say, okay, ready to go, and get everything quiet. Silencio, 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 silencio. Guys would yell silencio to shut people up. They didn't ring a bell then. And so that was, and I observed him. I thought he was very good, and I'd seen his movies, some of his movies, which were, of course, magnificent, his triple Oscar films and things like that. I didn't really actually meet him until I met him socially, because his daughter worked at William Morris, which was an agency, worldwide agency, and there was very kind of like the elite girls worked there, and men and women, I mean, the agents. One was the daughter of Suso Cecco D'Amico, which is one of the great screenwriters, still alive and active, I believe, in films, in making wonderful film after another as writer. Then there was a couple of other grown-up agents, and then these two kind of 25-year-old girls. And one was Silvia D'Amico, and the other was Amy DeSica, Emilia. So we had a little loving that turned into marriage. But before the marriage, I found out later, Vittorio, pretty much of a ladies' man himself, didn't want his daughter to fall in the clutches of someone who had been married before. I had been married before. And American and an actor. That's 2 or 3 strikes against you, right? So he asked his friend, Roberto Rossellini, you worked with this boy, Peter Baldwin. What's he like? Is he okay? And evidently Roberto gave me the okay. And so this began this wonderful marriage that unfortunately didn't last the test of time, didn't pass the test of time, but we have a glorious daughter between us, Eleonora, and she's half American, half Italian, and works in the film business of all things as a script supervisor. But it put me in very close contact with Vittorio, where I heard many, many stories about his life and how he started as an actor. And he embraced me as a son-in-law. He was a great guy. Only once or twice did he get mad at me. I worked as an assistant director with him on 2 films, one in France and one in Italy. But he did have one. I think the only time he really got mad at me was we were out at an auberge in France, shooting this film in France. And it was a large dinner table. And for some reason, I don't know, it wasn't boy, girl. There was Vittorio, and I was sitting next to him. And this, at a certain moment, I saw the sommelier step up behind him and whisper in his ear, "Oh, what's that?" He said, "Everyone stop drinking their wine, because in Italy, you get the wine and the bread before the food comes. In France, they say, no, the wine comes with the food," except Vittorio, being Italian, says what he wants when he wants it. But now he's saying, let's all stop. Everyone put their wine glasses down. We have today, I'm informed, Haut-Brion 56, a very wonderful year of Haut-Brion, whoever kind of wine it was, I don't know. So I'm not a wine drinker, nor certainly not a wine connoisseur. So the guy came out with the bottle, a big bottle, I guess they call it Magnum or something, a big bottle, swathed in a wonderful napkin, so you could hardly even see it, like a baby in there. And he started to pour. And he was explaining Haut-Brion 56, and he poured it. And they got big glasses, that big, and big glasses, and the wine was being poured. And we're and it's this family thing. I'm saying family auberge is not just the 2 of us. There's 15 people there, all gathered around these tables. And so while he's going, the sommelier is going the other direction, and Vittorio is swirling and sniffing and saying, "Oh, yes, yes." I'm getting the Evian bottle and cutting mine, because I'll make it like a rosé, because I don't like wine. Red wine particularly reminds me of the old days in church, right? I would rather just have it weakened. And he whacked my hand. Bam! He says, "You don't have to drink it if you don't want it, but you don't tamper with this wine. This wine has been," you know. So anyway, that's the only time he really whacked my arm. He said, "Don't do that, don't do that, don't drink it, don't pour water into red wine." So, but actually all done with humor, but you know, he really was upset about that. I'm sure he must have said, "Americano." The rest of the time it was wonderful with him, and the stories abounded. I learned he told stories on himself too often, but the family lore is built around his beginnings as an actor. Although he was the father of Neo-realism, he was the son of a man who worked as a clerk in a bank, Umberto D., his father, Umberto. And his father must have been a great character. I mean, you can just see where Vittorio gets some of his humor. His father, this is a story that Vittorio told me that was so wonderful. His father, like most Italians in the early part of the 20th century, had a tailor. He would go to a tailor. They didn't go to Marshall's or to Macy's. They went to a tailor. Each one had their own tailor, the best tailor, the worst tailor, the best tailor. And he had a tailor, and he, as his means dictated, he didn't have all the money to pay the tailor, but he had the clothes, right? So at a certain point, the tailor the tailor, accosted him in the street and said, "You owe me money. You owe me so and so many lira. You owe me money." And he said, "Get your hands off of me." And he reached in his pocket and he took out an envelope that on the back of it had some names on it. And he said, do you know what you've done just now? You see this list? These are the people that I happen to owe money to currently. See where you were? Right at the top. Not anymore. No, you're here at the bottom. and the guy was so nonplussed, he went away. Okay, so he got a couple more months or whatever, years or months that of grace out of this tailor. They lived in Naples, but Vittorio was born, as I think the family originated in Campobasso, which is between Rome and Naples, a little more in the country than Naples. Although Naples, if you tell anyone Naples, DeSica's not from Naples, they probably will get you in the throat, because he's their favorite son, without a doubt. There's another funny thing I know, when they're walking in the street, his father would say, recite the poem you learned in school. And they learned The Raven, Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven in French. And so he said, the poem, say the poem. And they walked by someone he knew was coming. And the father was agreeing with him, this boy speaking French. And then he'd stop and talk, oh, hello, having known that they've heard his boy and him conversing in French, which neither of them knew, right? The kid learned it by rote, and the guy, the Umberto, was making it like conversation rather than the poem being read. Vittorio, as a boy, grew up with his parents. He used to talk fondly about the times he'd go out on walks with his mom and dad, and they would be coming down the street, and they would go over the curb and into the street, and up the next curb on the sidewalk, and he'd be asleep in his parents' arms, and he'd hear them marciapiede, which means sidewalk, strada. He would just not, so he wouldn't trip, and they just carried him along. He was walking but asleep in their arms, and he loved that family idea. His father told him, do what you want to do. Don't compromise. I don't like where I work, but I have to support the family. His father encouraged him to be an actor, to do what you had to do to be an actor, and he got and he came to got in a play, and in the play he was, I think, the angel of death or something. Some major moment at the very end of the play. The door opened and this man stood there with a hat, and he said maybe 2 words, "It's now," or something like that, "El tempo." Something. He said something like that meant, whatever you're doing, this is the moment. And it was the people reacted to it, and that was it. The play was over in another couple of minutes. Well, his father would go to the theater every night. I don't know how long the run was, but whatever it was, he went every night. He saw every one of the plays, and every night he waited for his son to say those 2 words, or the look that he gave, or took his hat off, or whatever it was, the symbol of something changes everything in this play. And he would criticize him. No, it wasn't so good tonight. What was it with the hat? Why was it tilted too much? No, don't be that. That brings attention to your, no. He criticized. So every night Vittorio would get this criticism at the end of the play. Oh, okay, thanks. Anyway, his father never saw him in anything else after that, never saw him as a director, never saw him in films as an actor. But he honored him later by naming one of his most famous and most gripping neo-realistic film. Umberto D was the name of his father, and that's what he named. And Umberto D was a very sad and very strong neo-realism to the point where there was no satisfaction at the end, no happy ending, no this protagonist triumphs. This is an old guy. Anyway, we'll get to that later. Now, he joined an acting company after that, a family acting company, the Rossoni family. The leading lady was Giuditta Rossoni. Her brother, Checco, was the comic relief. A family, or maybe 2, formed theater companies. And oddly enough, in Italy, the summer is the time for the winter is the time for plays, right? In the summer, they take off. Well, what they would do, the company would go down to South America and work its way up from South America, a lot of Italians in Argentina, as you know, up through Mexico, and then go back. So they were always in play. When they got into Mexico, Giuditta, who was Vittorio's first wife and the mother of Emilia, my wife, she was a young girl. Her mother and her brother, Checco, was even younger than her, and he was the comic relief later on. But the grandmother, so to speak, would take them with them when they would go shopping for food and stuff in Mexico. And one day, Checco didn't come with them. And this is a very funny story to the Rossoni family, because but you know, it's gruesome in a way. The butcher said, "Hey, would the kid die or what? Where's the kid? He die? Like, you know, life or death. Quick, over, done." And they were shocked by this. "No, he's not. He's at home. He's got maybe a fever, maybe a little fever, but not." "Oh, okay. I just thought maybe he died because he usually comes with you." So, you know, so that and another story about a family. One of the family matrons, let's say, or elderly ladies, used to spend her vacation. This was long after that touring stopped. She would go to England. And when she come back from England, the kids would all swarm around her and say, "Tell us the story about how they line up. You know, one behind the other. People line up like for the bus. They line up like Indian file. They lined up. Indians. Well, tell us about that." And she would tell them how people line up in England, very orderly, and the bus comes to a stop, and no one shoves and no one pushes. They get on, and they say, "Why do they do that?" I mean, you know, Italy, you know. If you're lining up to buy a stamp, you're elbowing, you're in there, you're pushing, you know, and people aren't, you know, a guy would have to hurt you before you give him, "Hey, what are you doing?" No, you just go, yeah, and you get in there. I even asked the cameraman on the Rossellini film, "Carlo, why, if the bus comes up and there's a little old lady there, and the bus stops, and she's been there longer than you have, and the bus stops here, and she has to take 2 steps to her left instead of you going straight ahead, you still elbow her out of the way and get on?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Why do you do that?" "Because I want to get on the bus." So I said, "So does she." "Well, let her. You know, like get a sharper elbow." But anyway, the kids asked, why do they do that in England? Why do they line up like that? And the woman's only answer was, "It amuses them. It must amuse them to do that, to stand in line like that." Certainly is not the way to get on a bus. But that was the company, the Rossoni acting company. And Vittorio married the leading lady, Giuditta Rossoni, who is a fine actress. She was Marcello Mastroianni's mother in 8 1/2, if you remember, a very tolerant and wonderful woman at the end. So Vittorio, as the actor, starts in films as a young leading man, very handsome, very kind of sleek, you know. I always think of him as a kind of big, chunky head with this wonderful white hair. And until I met him, when I had more hair, I used to have a part in my hair. And when I saw his hair, this glorious white hair that would start and just go back, and you get the idea, he just combed it once a day, and that was it. So I lost the part forever. So he was a handsome leading man, and he then started to direct. Now, I don't know what the impetus was for directing. I know that he revered music more than anything, more than films. He loved music. He loved the symphony music. He loved the music and classics. And he said the best thing in the world for him could have been, what he wanted, not wanted to be, because he didn't try, but what he would have liked to have been, you know, was a musical director, a conductor of music. He said, what a position he's in. He hears all this music. He gets to shape it. So maybe that was an impetus, because he was strong in that. He really thought, he loved, that was the best thing he could think of. Somewhere, though, he decided to make the move to directing. And he was given a package, a kit, a directing kit, so to speak, by famous Palumbo. He was way before I was there, but he was a famous Italian director. And Palumbo gave him this, and it was a doctor's valise, a little doctor's bag, you know, it opens like this. There was a derby hat. In the valise was a pair of a false mustache and a pair of glasses. You never can tell when a character might need glasses. And this isn't for the director. This is to give to the different actors to save the scene. You know what? Let's give you a mustache. You know, and in the bag also, with these props, so to speak, and the derby, was the switch, a camera switch. It's not a very big thing. It's got a little, in those days, for the Metro camera, it's got a little cord that goes that way and another cord that goes a little longer, right? And it's the switch that turns the camera on and off. And it's attached to the power. He said, because there's going to come a time when the cameras won't work. Well, they're going to check every cable. They're going to go all the way to the wall in the back because that's where the power came from. And before they put batteries on dollies, that's where everywhere. Oh, it's in the taking the camera apart. He said, it's always the switch. The switch is broken, but you got a switch, so you'll save the day, and you'll be able to carry on with the shooting without much of an interruption. So that was Palumbo's gift to him. I made a rule just a rule, my own rule. I know the two rules, have something to say and say it, but I had a rule also, is never steal from yourself. Never repeat yourself, but you can steal from the masters. You can do that. If you remember the great film, I Soliti Ignoti, which was a very wonderful film, takeoff of Rififi. Remember Rififi, where there was a room, someone had an apartment house or something, there was a room near the bank vault. And they went through the room, the wall, with this jack that they would, they could put pressure on this wall and knock a hole in that wall, and in there was the vault. They start too late, so they're already doomed. They can't get this thing going until dawn, but they finally get the hole open, and of course, there's a guy in there. One of the guys, they're supposed to be the lookout. His name was Campanile, the bell tower. He was eating some beans, and they'd broken the wrong wall. They went into the kitchen. So there he is, he's surprised. What? I'm just taking the little beans. There's some beans on the stove. So they sit down and they have a meal, and then they leave. And in the newspaper article it says, Soliti Ignoti means the usual suspects, the usual unknowns, as it is. The crimes are not committed by this guy. This guy, they're committed by the usual unknowns. And there it was. And in this particular robbery, the house was broken into and the crooks ate a meal or something. So I stole that in a hurry, boy, one time.